What would you sacrifice to give your children a better life? How far would you go if staying meant watching them grow up without hope, without opportunity, without a future? And what if I told you that the hardest part of leaving everything behind isn't the journey? It's the moment you realize that in your new country, you're invisible, worthless, and completely alone? My name is Elena Vasquez, and 7 years ago, I arrived in the United States with my 2 children, carrying nothing but a backpack full of dreams and a heart full of terror. Today, I own a small restaurant in Queens. My daughter is in college, and my son plays violin in his school orchestra. But the story of how we got here, the real story that nobody talks about, is one of hunger, humiliation, and hope so fragile it could break with a single rejection letter. Let me start with the truth. Nobody wants to hear about immigration. You don't just leave your country, you leave yourself behind, too. The person you were, the teacher, the mother, the woman with opinions and dreams and a place in the world, that person doesn't exist anymore the moment you cross the border. In Honduras, I was Professor Elena Vasquez. I taught literature at Universidad Nacional, had published 2 books of poetry, owned a small house with a garden where my children played. I wasn't rich, but I was somebody. People knew my name, respected my work, asked for my opinion on things that mattered. Then the violence came to our neighborhood, and being somebody became dangerous. The decision to leave wasn't really a decision. It was survival instinct disguised as choice. When my neighbor Maria was found murdered in her own kitchen because she'd refused to pay protection money to the local gang, I knew we were next. Her crime had been running a small bakery, just like my crime was having a job, a house, anything worth taking. "Mama, why are we packing everything?" my daughter Sophia asked. She was 14 then, old enough to understand that something was wrong, but young enough to still believe her mother could fix anything. "We're going on a trip, mija," I lied, because how do you tell your children that the only way to keep them alive is to tear them away from everything they've ever known? My son Carlos, only 10, was excited. "Like vacation?" he asked, carefully packing his violin in its case. "Something like that," I said, not knowing that it would be 3 years before he'd have the courage to play music again. The journey north was a blur of buses, walking, and fear so constant it became background noise. We traveled with other families, all of us carrying the same desperate hope wrapped in plastic bags and hidden in shoes. Children cried, mothers whispered prayers, fathers stared into nothing, trying to convince themselves they were doing the right thing. I remember crossing the Rio Grande at night, holding my children's hands so tightly, I was afraid I might break their fingers. The water was cold and moving fast, and for a moment, I thought we were all going to die in that river, that our story would end before it ever really began. "Don't let go," I whispered to them. "No matter what happens, don't let go." We made it across, wet, exhausted, terrified, but alive. I thought the hard part was over. I was so wrong. Our first night in America, we slept in a parking lot behind a McDonald's in McAllen, Texas. I'd imagined this moment differently, our arrival in the land of opportunity, the beginning of our new life. Instead, we huddled together on concrete, using our backpacks as pillows while my children shivered in their damp clothes. Sophia tried to be brave, but I could see the questions in her eyes. This was America. This was the better life I'd promised them. Carlos had developed a cough during the river crossing, and it was getting worse. Every time he coughed, I felt like a piece of my heart was breaking off and floating away. "Mama, I'm scared," he whispered. "I know, baby, I'm scared too." The thing about being undocumented is that you become a ghost in your own life. We made it to New York after 2 weeks of hitchhiking and riding Greyhound buses. I'd chosen New York because I'd heard there were more opportunities, more people like us, more places to disappear into the crowd. What I hadn't understood was that disappearing meant becoming nothing. I couldn't get a real job without papers. I couldn't rent an apartment without credit or references. I couldn't enroll my children in school without an address. Every system designed to help people required you to already be part of the system. We spent our first month in New York sleeping in subway stations and 24-hour laundromats. The first job I found was cleaning offices in Manhattan at night. The company didn't ask for papers. They just wanted someone desperate enough to work for $5 an hour, cash only, No questions asked. I started at midnight and worked until 6 a.m., scrubbing toilets and emptying trash cans in buildings where people made more in a day than I'd make in a month. During the day, I'd sleep on park benches while my children sat beside me, doing homework in notebooks we'd found in the garbage. Sophia had become like a second mother to Carlos, helping him with his reading while I recovered enough strength to work another night. People would walk by us, and I could see the judgment in their eyes. Another homeless family? Another problem for the city to solve. They couldn't know that just months earlier, I'd been lecturing university students about the beauty of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's prose. The hunger was the worst part. Not just the physical hunger, though that was constant and gnawing. It was the hunger for dignity, for recognition, for the simple human courtesy of being seen as a person rather than a problem. I remember standing in line at a food pantry with my children, watching Sophia's face burn with shame as other kids from the neighborhood saw us there. She'd started at a public school in Queens by then. We'd found a woman who let us use her address in exchange for cleaning her apartment twice a week. "Why can't we just go home, Mama?" Carlos asked one night as we shared a single sandwich between the three of us. "This is home now," I said, but the words tasted like lies in my mouth. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that home isn't a place you can return to? That sometimes love means burning all your bridges so your children can cross the river? The breaking point came 6 months after we arrived. I'd been cleaning offices every night, but the pay wasn't enough to rent even the smallest apartment. We were still sleeping in the subway, still eating whatever food pantries would give us, still living day to day with no real hope of anything better. Then Carlos got sick, really sick. The cough that had started at the river had turned into something worse. Pneumonia, the free clinic doctor said. He needed medicine, real treatment, a warm place to recover. I stood in that clinic, holding my feverish son, and realized I had failed them completely. In trying to save their lives, I'd destroyed their childhood. In seeking opportunity, I'd brought them nothing but suffering. That night, I called my sister back in Honduras and asked her to wire money for bus tickets home. But sometimes, salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Her name was Mrs. Chen, and she owned a small restaurant in Flushing called Golden Dragon. She'd been watching us in the subway station near her restaurant for weeks. This woman with 2 children who seemed different from the usual homeless families. One morning, she approached me while the kids were sleeping. "You speak good English," she said. "You work for me?" I was so surprised someone was talking to me like a human being that I almost cried. Yes, I can work. Not just work, real work. In kitchen, help customers, learn business. I pay fair wage, help you get apartment. I stared at her. Why? Why would you help us? Mrs. Chen smiled sadly. I come here from China 40 years ago. No English, no money, no friends. Someone helped me. Now I help you. Mrs. Chen didn't just give me a job, she gave me back my humanity. She let us sleep in the storage room behind the restaurant until we could afford our own place. She taught me to cook Chinese food, to use the register, to deal with suppliers. Most importantly, she taught me that being an immigrant didn't mean I had to stay invisible forever. In America, she told me one day as I practiced making dumplings, you can be anything you want, but first, you must believe you deserve to be anything. Those words hit me like a physical blow. I realized I'd stopped believing I deserved anything good. The constant rejection, the humiliation, the struggle to survive, it had convinced me that this was all I was worth. But watching my children start to smile again, seeing Carlos pick up his violin for the first time in months, watching Sophia make friends at school, I began to remember who I used to be. The hardest part wasn't the physical struggles, though those were brutal. It wasn't sleeping in subway stations or working for slave wages or eating 1 meal a day. The hardest part was maintaining hope when everything in your new world seemed designed to crush it. Every no felt personal. Every rejection felt like proof that we didn't belong here, that we'd made a terrible mistake. When landlords hung up on me because of my accent, when employers looked at me like I was trash, when other parents at school acted like my children were contagious, each small cruelty chipped away at my sense of self until I barely remembered who I'd been before. The psychological toll of starting over isn't something people talk about. They focus on the success stories, the people who made it, but they don't talk about the years of feeling like you're worth nothing, like you're begging the world for permission to exist. Learning to navigate American systems felt like learning to breathe underwater. Everything had rules I didn't understand. Banking, credit, insurance, taxes, concepts that seemed simple to everyone else but were completely foreign to me. I made mistakes that cost us money we couldn't afford to lose. I trusted the wrong people and got cheated. I signed documents I couldn't fully understand because I was afraid asking questions would reveal how lost I really was. Mrs. Chen helped when she could, but she was running a business and had her own problems. Mostly I learned through trial and error, and every error felt like a step backward when we could barely afford to stand still. I remember spending an entire day at the DMV trying to get a driver's license, only to be told I needed documents. I didn't have to get documents, I needed to get other documents. I sat in my car afterward and cried from frustration, feeling like the system was deliberately designed to keep people like me on the outside. The discrimination was constant but subtle, like poison in the air you breathe. People didn't usually say directly racist things. Instead, they'd speak slowly and loudly when they heard my accent, as if I were mentally impaired rather than bilingual. They'd assume I was the maid when I picked up Sophia from birthday parties. They'd switch to speaking only in English when I entered a room, even if they'd been speaking Spanish moments before. My children felt it too. Carlos came home from school one day with tears in his eyes because a teacher had told him to stop playing that noise when he was practicing violin during lunch break. Sophia started straightening her hair and refusing to speak Spanish in public, desperate to blend in. "I don't want to be different anymore," she told me one night. "I just want to be normal." But what is normal when your normal has been taken away from you? The turning point came during our second year in New York. Mrs. Chen had been teaching me more about running the restaurant, letting me handle the books, and deal with suppliers. I was good at it. All those years as a university professor had taught me how to organize information, solve problems, think strategically. One day, she sat me down in the empty restaurant after closing. "Elena, I'm getting old. My children, they don't want restaurant business. They want to be doctors, lawyers, important people." She smiled wryly. "They think restaurant is beneath them." "Mrs. Chen, you built something beautiful here." "Yes, but I can't run it forever. You understand this business now. You understand customers, suppliers, employees. You could run this place." My heart started racing. "Are you offering me a job as manager?" "I'm offering you chance to buy restaurant. I finance, you pay me back over time. You make Golden Dragon your own." The idea terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. Own a business? In America? Me, the woman who'd been sleeping in subway stations just 2 years earlier? It seemed impossible, but Mrs. Chen believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. "I don't know anything about business ownership," I said. "You know more than you think. You know how to work hard, you know how to survive. Everything else, you can learn." That night, I went home to our tiny apartment. We'd finally saved enough to rent a one-bedroom place where the kids slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. And I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the girl I used to be, the one who dreamed of writing novels and traveling the world. Those dreams seemed like they belonged to someone else now. But maybe that was okay. Maybe this new dream, this chance to build something for my children, was better than anything I'd lost. Learning to be a business owner in America was like learning to swim by jumping into the ocean. There were licenses to obtain, health inspectors to satisfy, taxes to file, employees to manage. Every day brought new challenges I wasn't prepared for. Equipment would break down when I couldn't afford repairs. Customers would complain about things I'd never considered. Suppliers would try to cheat the inexperienced immigrant woman who didn't know how things worked. But I had something now that I'd lost during those first dark months: purpose. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about building something that would last, something my children could be proud of. When Sophia brought friends to the restaurant after school, I could see the pride in her eyes as she introduced me as, "My mom, she owns this place." Carlos started playing his violin again, setting up in the corner of the restaurant on weekend afternoons. Customers loved it, and he loved the applause. Music came back into his life the same way hope had come back into mine, slowly, carefully, but undeniably. The hidden struggle that nobody talks about is the guilt. Guilt for leaving family behind. Guilt for the sacrifices your children make. Guilt for taking resources from your new country. Guilt for not being grateful enough, not succeeding fast enough, not adapting quickly enough. I felt guilty every time I sent money back to Honduras, knowing my children needed new clothes. I felt guilty when I couldn't help with their homework because I was working 16-hour days. I felt guilty when they had to translate for me at parent-teacher conferences, making them the adults in situations where they should have been children. Most of all, I felt guilty for the moments when I regretted coming here, when the weight of starting over felt heavier than the fear we'd left behind. Immigration isn't just about changing your location, it's about rebuilding your entire identity from scratch. And that process involves losing parts of yourself you never expected to lose. The restaurant became our anchor, the thing that made us feel like we belonged somewhere. Regular customers learned our names. They asked about Carlos's violin recitals and Sophia's grades. They celebrated with us when Sophia got accepted to college with a full scholarship. They became the extended family we'd left behind, the community that made us feel less alone. Mrs. Chen officially sold me the restaurant during our 3rd year, though she still came by every day to drink tea and offer advice. "Now you are a real American businesswoman," she said on the day I signed the final papers. But I didn't feel American. I felt like something new, not fully Honduran anymore, not completely American yet. Something in between, something uniquely shaped by the experience of starting over. 5 years after we arrived, Sophia graduated as valedictorian of her high school class. I sat in that auditorium watching my daughter, who'd once done homework on park benches, give a speech about resilience and the American dream, and I thought about all the nights I'd questioned whether we'd made the right choice. Her speech wasn't about success overcoming adversity, it was about how adversity had taught her to define success differently. Not just as achievement, but as the ability to maintain hope when hope seems impossible. My mother taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, she said to the crowd of graduating seniors and proud parents. Courage is being afraid and choosing to love anyway, choosing to hope anyway, choosing to build anyway. I cried through her entire speech, not because I was sad, but because I recognized the strength in her voice that had taken me years to find in my own. Carlos is 17 now, first violin in his high school orchestra, dreaming of Juilliard. He doesn't remember much about Honduras. He was so young when we left, but he remembers the subway stations, the hunger, the fear, and he remembers the day he started playing violin again in the restaurant, when music stopped being something he'd lost and became something he'd found. "Mama," he told me recently, "I understand now why we had to leave. Not just because it was dangerous there, but because here I get to become who I'm supposed to be." That's when I realized that the hidden struggle of immigration isn't just about what you lose, it's about what you discover you're capable of when you have no choice but to be stronger than you ever imagined possible. Today, Golden Dragon is one of the most popular restaurants in Flushing. We've expanded twice, hired 8 employees, won awards from local food magazines. Sophia is studying international business at Columbia, planning to help other immigrant entrepreneurs navigate the systems that once seemed so impossible to me. Carlos performs with the Youth Symphony and volunteers at the community center, teaching violin to other immigrant kids. But success isn't what makes the struggle worth it. What makes it worth it is the person I became in the process. Someone I never could have been if I'd stayed safe in the life I knew. The hidden struggle of starting over in a new country isn't just about overcoming obstacles. It's about discovering that you're stronger, more resourceful, more capable of love and hope than you ever knew. People ask me if I miss Honduras, if I ever regret leaving. I miss the woman I was there, the professor, the poet, the person who felt certain about her place in the world. But I don't regret becoming the woman I am now, the survivor, the builder, the mother who chose her children's future over her own comfort. Immigration taught me that identity isn't something fixed that you carry with you. It's something fluid that you create and recreate based on the choices you make and the love you carry. I am not the same person who crossed the Rio Grande 7 years ago. I am not the same person who cleaned offices for $5 an hour. I am not the same person who begged landlords to give us a chance. But I am still Elena, still a mother, still someone who believes that love is stronger than fear, that hope is more powerful than despair, that the future is worth any sacrifice the present demands. The hidden struggles nobody sees when you start over in a new country aren't just about language barriers or finding work or navigating bureaucracy. They're about rebuilding your sense of worth when everything familiar has been stripped away. They're about maintaining hope when every day brings new evidence that you don't belong. They're about protecting your children's dreams while grieving the loss of your own. They're about learning that strength isn't something you have. It's something you become through the process of refusing to give up. Every immigrant carries invisible scars from the journey, but we also carry invisible strengths that can only be forged in the fire of starting over with nothing but love and determination. If you're struggling with your own journey, whether it's immigration or any other kind of starting over, I want you to know this: you are braver than you think. You are stronger than you know. And the struggles that feel like they're breaking you are actually building something beautiful inside you that you can't see yet. Don't let anyone make you feel ashamed for needing help. Don't let anyone convince you that your dreams are too big for someone like you. Don't let the difficulty of the journey convince you that you're on the wrong path. The hidden struggles are real, and they're valid, and they matter. But they're not the end of your story. They're the beginning of becoming who you were always meant to be. 7 years ago, I thought America would save us. What I discovered is that we saved ourselves. America just gave us the space to do it. That's the real hidden truth about starting over. You don't just rebuild your life, you rebuild yourself. And sometimes, the person you become is stronger, wiser, and more beautiful than the person you ever could have been if you'd stayed safe in the world you knew. If this story reminded you that every person carries invisible struggles and that courage comes in many forms, including the quiet heroism of starting over against impossible odds, please subscribe to Top Life Stories. Because every immigrant, every person starting fresh, every dreamer building something from nothing has a story worth hearing and a strength worth celebrating.